Okay, Penn State football fans, we are back for another episode, installment, whatever you want to call it, of the Blue-White Breakdown. It's Monday. Bob Flounders joined here by Max Ralph. Originally, a couple hours ago, I was planning on delving into some current news about the Penn State football program, and Max, we may get to that, but it's kind of crazy in the Penn State recruiting world. Literally right before we started to record this, they got yet another commit. They were busy late last week. They've been busy since March. You, in your pursuit of a recruiting story out in Western PA on Kemon Spell, I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, correct me. You also got out to PNC Park, you lucky dog. So kudos to you for killing multiple birds. Not really killing birds, but killing. The phrase is killing two birds with one stone. Kudos to you. So much recruiting news here for the Penn State fans. Max, wherever you want to start, but I have a funny feeling it probably would be a good idea to start with the most recent addition in the Penn State football recruiting world.
That's right, Bob. I was just getting ready to hop on this podcast with you at noon, and right at 11:55, James Franklin's quote-unquote bat signal goes out, so it's a big one.
He did it on purpose. He knew we were going to get ready to podcast.
He did. I think he's really plugged in with the PennLive podcast.
He's listening right. So. He's going to be listening later today. He's not kidding anyone.
No, I'm with you. He's definitely plugged in. But so it's Mathieu Llama. I hope I said that right as well. But it's a linebacker from Virginia, 3-star by the ratings. But Bob, let me tell you, I flipped some film on because this one was picking up steam for a while. He's a guy that the staff has liked for months now. A guy they really wanted. I flipped on some film in preparation for this happening, and let me tell you, I think that this is a guy who I could see you falling in love with, Bob, once he gets on campus. He's a thumper. I mean, he is a thumper up the middle, playing a lot of the middle linebacker spot, like just a really physical kid. I mean, he is not afraid to get his nose up in the line of scrimmage. He plays with great leverage, and I mean, he hits hard. He hits really hard. You don't see a lot of guys at his age and their junior years of high school who, you can flip on the film and you just see them making so many tackles physically in the heart of the defense. I mean, a lot of times it's athletic plays. It's not as much physical. This kid's really physical. And so that's a good sign for Penn State. It's something they obviously need. In the future, the linebacking core has promise, but it's a little thin at the current state. And so getting some promise there is never a bad thing. Really impressed with the film so far of Llama. And as you mentioned it, Bob, and as I mentioned right before we hopped on here, it's 7 commitments since March 25th for Penn State. I mean, obviously, as soon as spring ball is over, we all kind of turn the page to recruiting for the rest of the summer. But Penn State hasn't even waited for spring ball to end. They've had so many productive visits throughout the spring practices, like that. They really had a ton of top guys on, retaining guys, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding, Bob. 7 commits in a little over a month. It's red hot.
Couldn't get much hotter, Penn State fans. Also, you said linebacker, and I believe late last week, an in-state linebacker from Coatesville also is a Penn State commitment. What do you know about him?
Yeah, I wish Johnny, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little more with Johnny as well, because he made that trip out to Coatesville recently to talk with Wiggins and the head coach over there. But it's another guy that Penn State has targeted for a long time. He and Canoe are kind of similar. Canoe. It's Mathieu Llama. He recently changed his name, so that's why I said Canoe. Apologies there, Mathieu. But Llama and Terry Wiggins over at Coatesville, kind of similar in the sense that like their recruiting rankings weren't super high for a while, but Penn State's been on these guys for a long time. Really impressive on the tape. And I mean, you can go read. Johnny did a deep dive from his visit to Coatesville a couple weeks ago. You can find that on PennLive. And then the things that were said about him were just glowing. And it's pretty clear in the way that he answered everything Johnny asked him, that he is a competitive guy out there on the field. Got the fire that Penn State's looking for. And I do think that these are. They might go under the radar from a national scope, but I think that these 2 pickups are really good for Penn State.
All right. And we haven't even gotten to your road trip west, which is next on my agenda to cover with the Penn State football fans. Before we talk about the five-star kid,
Mm-hmm.
you went to PNC Park at least once.
Yep.
You're a Cubs fan. You don't try and hide it. They're off to a great start. That's not my question. My question for you is, when you were in Pittsburgh, you go to PNC Park. What did you eat at the park?
So I actually didn't even eat at the park, which might sound crazy, Bob. I mean, I had an ice cream helmet, because I wanted the souvenir more than the ice cream. But I love collecting those little guys.
Okay.
I did not eat at the park because I snagged some food right at Mike's Beer Bar right outside, right beforehand. Had a little pierogi wrap, which was crazy but delicious.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoyed that. I was born in Pittsburgh, Bob. Not a lot of people know that, considering all the Chicago gear I wear most of the time. But
Mm-hmm.
big fan of the city. Great week out at PNC Park. Cubs are off to a hot start. They're a lot of fun. So no complaints from the outing last week, especially considering, as you've teed up, I got the chance to talk with a pretty impressive Penn State commit.
Okay, real quick before we get to the commit, I can't remember what you said. Are you pro Mannys Brothers sandwiches, or are you against the concept of coleslaw and French fries on a sandwich?
So I am not a coleslaw fan in any.
You can get it without.
Right, I know, in any way, shape, or form, but that's why I preface this by saying, I love Mannys Sandwiches. I'm
Okay, good.
totally into the idea. The fries are really quite solid, and I think that the sandwiches would be incomplete without the coleslaw. I'd feel wrong eating it without it.
Okay, all right. Also, very healthy sandwich, I think, for everyone out there that's had them. Couldn't be eating any healthier if you have a couple of Mannys sandwiches and a couple of beers with that. So, all right.
That's right.
I'm burying the lead. Let's get to Kiman Spell, 5-star running back. You had a chance to visit with him. You have a story up on PennLive, Penn State football fans. You need to check that out immediately. Drop what you're doing after you listen to this podcast or watch us. Keep watching. Then go to PennLive and read Max's story. But what were some of your takeaways, Max, from meeting with this kid? You got an up close glimpse of him? What do you have to share with the Penn State football fans?
Yeah, I think the first thing that is worth sharing is just when I sat down with Coach Matt Miller as well. When I sat down with him, he's like, listen, I played at McKeesport. I've coached in the Whippeal forever. I've never seen a kid like this. Because, listen, there's a lot of really good football talent that comes out of the Whippeal. We all know that. I mean, every year they're churning guys out. And, I mean, he's another case where you turn on the tape and this kid, he just turned 16. Last weekend. I mean, he hasn't even finished his sophomore year of classes yet, and he is just running away from other guys on the field. I think one of the quotes in the story that I got from Miller that really resonated with me when I dive into the film, when I watch Kiman play, he says, I've never seen a kid who runs at full speed and is still able to make moves around defenders. There is no slowdown in Kiman's running. I mean, he's making cuts like he already looks like he's playing on a college field. I mean, obviously there's still going to be room for him to grow, to outrun guys, further in his junior and senior years. He just started running track rather to try and work on that 40 time and everything. But, in talking with Kiman himself too, I just found him to be a really impressive human being. I mean, even beyond the recruiting and the on-field talent, because let's be real, Bob, you and I, if we were 14, 15 years old and getting offers from all these schools and everything, I don't know how I would handle it. But he was he walked in the room. We were in a little office over at McKeesport High School, and he walked in the room and he's almost bouncing. He's got so much energy just when he walks, got a big smile on his face. Everything is yes, sir. He was very appreciative of the fact that anyone was out there to do an interview. Just a really, really intelligent kid for his age, handles all this well. And I think that I got that as well from Coach Miller, who, said he actually, an interesting part of the story, if you give it a read, he mentioned how kids from opposing areas, they go on the road and there's kids who just want to get high fives or take pictures with Kiman. Opposing teams come out to see him. He is becoming a huge deal in the area, and Kiman has just handled it with, pure class the whole way through. He's a big time player, and Penn State's going to love to be able to keep him home. I mean, he's got his recruitment shut down right now, and he's very adamant about his love for Penn State. I know there is an Ohio State offer out there on the table that just came in pretty recently, but he was adamant about his love for Penn State. It's important to remember there's still a year and a half until he signs papers to go anywhere. Yep. But he's definitely got a lot of love for Penn State. Impressive kid, and I spent about an hour over at McKeesport, and so it's hard not to walk away with a lot of good things to say about him.
Nice, Max. Well, Max, I'm going to give you some advice and I hope you take it to heart, because this is a great opportunity for you. If I were you, and I know probably our bosses are listening to this, if I were you, I would try and milk this Kiman Spell profile. Just keep going back out there and just try and go there. Make sure it's during baseball season, at least one or two times in the off season. You can get some fresh stuff on Kiman. You can get back out to PNC Park. You're a Pittsburgh guy. I sincerely hope this isn't going to be your only trip to Pittsburgh, because you can continue to go to Cubs Pirates games, and you can continue to provide the Penn State football fans with updates on this running back, because he's a 5-star, and like you said, he's going to be one of the hot. They have to continue to recruit him because other schools are going to be after him. So this story's not going away. I hope you can get like 3 or 4 more visits to Pittsburgh out of this, and I'm hoping you've already started plotting to do that right now.
Bob, the Cubs are back in town in September, so it's in the heart of the football season. But I promise you, I'm well aware of their schedule.
All right. Well, I wish you good luck with that. If you enjoy this Blue White Breakdown podcast, and I know you do, it's Max and Bob here talking on Monday. We just got to a bunch of recruiting nuggets from Max. We're going to talk a little spring ball and maybe something about maybe a linebacker or two that Penn State's looking for. But if you're enjoying this podcast, you need to check out another podcast. I got some details. It is Death County, PA, hosted by award-winning journalist Josh Vaughn. You can listen to it on the Wondery app or wherever, at Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Highly recommend it. You guys need to check it out. Death County, PA, hosted by award-winning journalist Josh Vaughn. I think once you start it, you're really going to like it. That's my recommendation. All right, Max. Let's get back. Let's talk a little bit more about not so much recruiting, although I have a funny feeling, we're going to be talking a lot more about Penn State recruiting in the coming weeks, the way they are landing kids. But, I feel like there's still some unfinished business when it comes to James Franklin's current program. He talked about it at the end of spring. We were up there. Chilly conditions. We sucked it up. We watched the game 10-8, a thriller. I think the white one, my memory serves. But he talked a little bit he was asked about the linebacker depth, and he just basically said it. They want at least one veteran linebacker. They're a little short. It sounds like they were caught off guard by Tamir Robinson's decision to go to USC, and they're looking at a couple. One of them, I really hope I get this guy's last name right, but if I'm not right, you correct me. Mohammed, is it Toure?
Toure.
Toure. He's the older brother of a Penn State safety. This is actually going to be his 7th season. He's had some really bad luck with ACL injuries. I remember this kid playing against Penn State. He was an impact player, but that was at least one ACL injury ago. I'm not sure where he's at with that, but I know they were looking at him. They're looking at another linebacker. We're talking about this at 12:30 on Monday. A lot could change, but I don't know about you, Max. They're going to get at least one. I mean, they've invested heavily in this 2025 season. They've invested heavily in the transfer wideouts. They've invested heavily in some Penn State kids who could have been in the draft and would have got drafted very high to get them to come back. They're not going to let something like a linebacker, a valuable veteran linebacker, prevent them from giving it their best shot, because they are most definitely, Max, all in 2025.
Most definitely is the correct way to put it. I mean, James Franklin always says we're not a big transfer portal team. And there's truth to it. I mean, comparatively speaking to other programs around the country that are bringing in 40 kids every year, but But Penn State really goes out and usually only tries to fill their needs, right?
Right.
But this year, and I think more noticeably than the past few years, they have been aggressive in filling those needs. It's always been, a guy we have connection with, yada yada. But this year, I mean, all the three receivers they went out and got, they had to be aggressive for those guys, especially Pena, the most recent one. And now they've got two guys in the linebacker spot coming and visiting campus who are, this late in the portal cycle, they're big names. Torre from Rutgers, and then I believe on campus on Monday, as we speak, Bob, is Amare Campbell from North Carolina, who is a younger guy. They're kind of they're two opposite sides of the coin here, Torre and Campbell, because Torre is a veteran guy, like you said, absolutely a playmaker. He was named a team captain before injuring his ACL again this past year, 2-time team captain, but like a veteran guy. I mean, you play 7 years in college football, that's valuable in its own sense. But Campbell is, I believe, going into his junior year, guy who put up I think the number is 76 tackles last season. Talented guy who kind of flew under the radar as a prospect. And if Penn State's in a situation where they evaluate this linebacker room and they say, listen, next year, 2 years from now, we still don't necessarily know what we have. They could bring in a guy that has some potential and could help this team beyond just this year, which is just something that, James Franklin and his staff are certainly interested in and have been interested in the past. I mean, you can look across the defense, look at a guy like Audavian Collins, bringing back King Mack in the safety room. That's definitely something that I think appeals to this staff. But those two linebackers are pretty big time. Torre also has a couple of other big programs on his visit list. I think Miami is one of them. It's busy, but they're putting in the effort to land one of them. And you're absolutely right. They're not going to let this one position be the reason a team is not going to be able to make a national championship push, which I think is impressive.
Yeah, they are not toe dipping in the pool. They're all the way in. They're cannonballing it. They are going to get a linebacker. If it's not, they're going to identify one, and they're going to get somebody who wants to play at Penn State and make an impact. As they put the finishing touches on what should be a very, very talented roster, they're looking for a little bit more depth at linebacker. I'm fascinated to see how the wideout picture comes together, because it's going to have to come together pretty quickly. I do think, and I know you probably talked about it with Johnny McGonigal on your podcast later in the week. I've talked about it with Johnny. Their schedule sets up for them to, it's almost like an extended, I'm not trying to slight their non-conference schedule, but they get them lined up early in the season, and they have a little runway, I think, other than August practice, to get everything together for when Oregon comes visiting in late September. So to see, Max, how it's going to play out. I wanted to say, before we wrap up this edition of the Blue White Breakdown, we've talked recruiting, talking about the current team. Make sure you check out Max's story on Kiman Spell. Highly recommend that. Max, I haven't really had a chance to chat with you. I wanted to get, who are two players that surprised you in a good way with what was said about them or what you saw from them, that you think can help this team? I'm not talking about guys that the fans already know about. Are there one or two players that you think, if they took a step, probably in off-season workouts, they were talked about by the coaching staff, or you saw that on the practice field or in the blue-white game, and in your mind, they just take a little teeny tiny more step forward in August, they're going to be key contributors at key positions for Penn State? Is there one name or two that you have for me?
Bob, I think I'll try and give you two.
Yeah,
but I've really been trying to keep a close eye on the early enrollees right now, because look, they're the unknowns, and we don't necessarily anticipate many of them coming in and contributing right away. But I do think that some of them have really caught my eye, and I know that you've written about a few of them already to this point, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
But Darius Dixon out in that cornerback room.
Wow.
I remember just like the first couple of weeks of practice, we were watching him and say, okay, he looks a little stiff out there, but he's got the size, he's got the measurables, give him some time. And it's, 4 weeks later, and he is laying one heck of a hit out there in the spring game. I think that like as soon as the speed continues to catch up, the physicality of playing corner in the Big Ten. Look, he played at a really good high school at Mater Dei, but there's still a jump. There's still a jump. Penn State's got to get him right, but once they do, the kid's going to be really good. He's got great ball skills. He's got great instincts. And I've talked about the other kid on the other side of the ball a lot with Johnny, but so much is made of these wide receivers because of how much they need to be better this year. The guy who I have an eye out for, and maybe not this year, but soon, is Lyric Samuel. Like, I tell you what, I have not seen a Penn State receiver in the past 2 or 3 years be able to go up and high point a ball like he can. I mean, it's because he's 6'4". Like, he has the size, still needs to add some weight, but the ball skills are there. I mean, they are there in a way that we have not seen for a while from a Penn State receiver. And like, that's my opinion. It's based off of what we've seen in practice so far. Obviously, he had the only receiving touchdown of the game in the spring game. But those two guys, I think, are really worth keeping an eye on. You know, I could rattle off all the other ones you want, like Owen Alicine up front. We've heard really good things about him. Tyke Hayes. I think not a freshman, but Quentin Martin has taken a step forward this spring. I thought he looked more physical in practices and on the field when we saw him. There are a lot of names that we can keep going down the list for, but I'll give you those two for now, Bob.
Yeah. Dixon, man, I'm just going to say, like, Penn State since James Franklin's been at Penn State with Terry, they have not hesitated to put a true freshman corner out there, not just on special teams, but that, you know, whether it's early in the season or by the middle of the season, they have not hesitated. Kalin King, I think his true freshman season was out there playing by the end of the year. You could tell he had it. But this kid, he's a January enrollee. He does not act or look like a first-year player out there. He looks comfortable already. And yeah, I just think the more reps he gets, the better he's going to get. And I think their corner room is really, really, really good if they stay healthy. But I don't see a world he's going to force his way onto the field.
Yeah,
it may not even take an injury, but if they commit to playing him, he's going to play. And I do think, boy, the way that he moves out there, I know it was only the spring game. It was impressive. The one guy I just wanted to bring up, just because I was struck by what people said about him. It's really hard to notice the position initially, but I remember talking to Devon J. Thomas at Pro Day, and I said, hey, man, you know, Beeman left the team last season. You're out. Keziah's out. You got Zane back, but who were the names? Like, who are going to be the guys? He didn't hesitate. He brought up Xavier Gilliam, right out of the chute. He's a big guy, and he's going to almost have to be a force for Penn State. You know, it's a thin room. Zane's a great player. Alonzo Ford, they are hopeful that he'll be back and rolling. But after that, the guy that everyone kept mentioning was him. So to me, he's a guy I think that by the end of September, if we're not talking about him and saying, hey, man, they really have a good young defensive tackle. I know they like the freshman Adarica Randy a lot, but this is a guy I think we should keep close tabs on as well. So I think you like him a little bit too, but it's a position that gets overlooked inside, but it's a very important position, and they just can't afford to play Zane Durant, 50 or 60 snaps a game. They have to be able to take him out, or he's not going to last for when the meaningful games come.
Yeah, I've been on the Gilliam train for a while too, Bob. I think I spent a lot of time with him at the second-year player availability that we had back in February. Really smart kid, and I think the defensive line is a underrated position in terms of having to have a high football IQ. You got to be able to recognize what's going on in front of you and split-second decisions. I think that's really going to help him. He's put on a ton of weight since he got here, and he is a weight room beast. I mean, we saw it wasn't quite a max out session, but it was a max out session, quote unquote. In the winter, he was throwing around some serious weight on the squat racks. I think that he's that number 2 right now with Alonzo Ford not handling a whole lot of activity, and he needs to be. And even beyond him, Bob, they still need one or two more guys. They need to be 4 or 5 deep up front. Otherwise, you run into issues like Michigan from 3 years ago running for 450 yards on you. Things like that start to happen if you're not deep up the middle. And right now they feel really good about 3 guys in that defensive tackle room, and they're hoping that probably 2 more are going to elevate themselves soon.
Yeah, and I would just add this. I think what's going to help with this development is, and you really don't think about it because they haven't had this luxury, but I just think the young guys, if they like them, just going against Penn State's offensive line in practice, like that should, if there's such a thing as fast-tracking development on the practice field, with what Penn State has up front, they have no choice but to get better or they're going to get run over. So I do think that will help. And if you're right, if they have to be at 4 or 5 guys, I thought it kind of caught up with them. They got lucky last year, but they really only had 3 defensive tackles for their stretch run, and they were able to, other than the Notre Dame game, they were kind of able, to play from in front against SMU and Boise. But that was something that that could have bit them a little bit. It didn't, but something to watch moving forward, Max. Enjoy talking with you. We're going to wrap up this edition of the Blue White Breakdown. I think it'll be you and Johnny later this week. I might be pinch hitting. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about your travel schedules, but keep me in the loop. I'm glad you survived PNC Park. And that's it for this edition of the Blue White Breakdown.